The Baltimore Ravens add a big-time wide receiver prospect in our latest Mock Draft Monday. We dive into a full 7-round Ravens mock draft. We look at the Darius Slay situation and how close he actually was to becoming a Raven. We look at mock drafts from Twitter and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast here. I'm your host, Kevin Ostrecker of Ravens Wire, and we are here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us today, making us your first listen every day here on Locked On Ravens. We are free and available, all platforms, including on YouTube, and it's free to subscribe both on YouTube and in audio form as well. So be sure to do that. And also, if you want to give a 5-star review, you can do that as well. If you want to tell a family member, tell a friend, we are here 5 days a week. So Ravens analysis, Ravens news, Ravens updates, we do have it for you here Monday through Friday. But we have a lot to talk about this week. Obviously, the start of another week here as we dive into another mock draft Monday, as we always do, where we go through different scenarios for this Baltimore team, where they could draft who, what picks they could have, and we know what picks they have right now, but obviously it could look very different by the time draft weekend is complete. We're almost there. We're almost to draft weekend. Is we only have 3 more mock draft Mondays after this one. So we're going to continue to dive into those, do a couple of different routines. We'll get into trade up scenarios, trade down scenarios. Today, though, is just going to be a regular 5-pick. That's how many picks they have. 5-pick mock draft where we'll talk about the Ravens getting some wide receiver help with a big-time wide receiver prospect. I did a full 7-round Ravens mock draft. So the first segment, we'll talk about that, who I picked and why. Then in the second segment, we'll move into a very interesting topic and something I want to expand on throughout the rest of this week here, which is the Ravens and Darius Slay, which I think then branches off into a couple of subtopics, but just how close Darius Slay was to actually signing with the Ravens and what that would have been like, what it would have meant, and just what happened in that situation. So really intriguing stuff in that second segment. Then in the final segment, we'll get to mock drafts from Twitter. I put out the mock draft I do on Sunday for Mock Draft Sunday. I put that out then on the Locked On Ravens account. And if you comment under that Locked On Ravens tweet, then I will read out your mock draft, or at least try to get to it over the course of the week's show. So again, a big shout out to everybody who submitted their mock draft. But let's first get into my mock draft, where I first selected at pick number 22, Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver from TCU. Now, Quentin Johnston is one of the more controversial wide receiver prospects, I think, in a couple of years. Like, some people think he's the absolute best wide receiver prospect in this class. Others think he's just going to be an absolute bust. Like, others believe that he is. I've seen Brashad Perriman, the bust level of Brashad Perriman that he was in Baltimore. Some people really want Quentin Johnston in Baltimore. Other people really do not. I personally would not be mad at it. I'm not absolutely in love with Quentin Johnston. I'm not saying that he's the next coming of Randy Moss or Calvin Johnson or something like that. Not one of these great wide receiver prospects, but I think he does have a ton of potential, and his physical frame is what the Ravens are looking for. A 6'4" guy, 212 pounds, and really his athletic gifts, they're real. They are really real. And for him in particular, obviously that TCU team went on a great run over the course of this past season. He has speed. He's very good with acceleration. The size is really, really good too. He's that guy who you look at him and you say that is a number 1 wide receiver, just the physical profile that you see. Now, he's very good both in man and zone systems and going up against that, but it seems like zone is where he excels. Not saying he's bad at man, but he is good in zone situations and excels in zone situations. And also, I think his release package is very good as well, and he has the agility to push a route vertically if you really want to. And he's also a guy he's just hard to bring down. A 6'4" guy is really hard to bring down. You see that in the tape as well. So he's an explosive guy. He has the speed. I know the 40 time was not, I think, what he wanted. I know a lot of people, I think, was it around a 4.5, I think, for Quentin Johnston. Maybe that causes him to slip a little bit down the draft board. But I think for him, beating press coverage is something I would want to see, just a little bit more consistency, getting more physical with that. But I think this is a player that could really help out Lamar Jackson if he stays, of course, and can really help out the Ravens in that wide receiver room where, the Ravens have the burners and the speedsters, but I think they really need that go-get-it guy with the big profile. I think Quentin Johnston is able to project as that, especially being 6'4". So that's to me where I want to see him be a playmaker in the NFL, just going up at the catch point and getting the football. And hopefully you can do that consistently at the NFL level here. So for me, I think that's a really solid pick at 22 if the Ravens were to get him there. And then at 86 in the third round, had to wait a while. I picked Elias Ricks, the corner from Alabama, 6'2", 190 guy. We know how the Ravens love their Alabama Crimson Tide players. And he was actually an LSU guy before moving on to Alabama. And he's a very high football IQ guy, has football instincts around the football. And he's someone he makes it difficult for opposing offenses, opposing quarterbacks, knows where to position himself in order to confuse an opposing offensive unit. And we saw that multiple times on the tape here. He's good at also reading the quarterback's eyes. Again, always around the football. He's deflecting passes, intercepting them. He's very disruptive. I think people like to use the word disruptive with him. He's physical as well. And I think the ball skills are really where I'm intrigued by a player like Eli Ricks, especially now with the Ravens not having a ton of depth outside of Marlon Humphrey. The Ravens definitely need to invest in the corner position. Now, he's not a speedster. He's not going to be a guy that can keep up with the fastest receivers in the league. And he's a little bit raw in terms of playing time. I think he will need to maybe work himself into a role, which again, it depends on what the Ravens do at corner and just how they can kind of push him along. Can it be a gentle push, or is it going to be like, get in there, you're playing? So hopefully the Ravens will make a veteran move like a Marcus Peters. I think this pick would pair very well with a Marcus Peters or even a Rock Ya-Sin for that matter. But I think Eli Ricks is a player I'd be very interested in if I'm Baltimore there. If he even ends up getting to 86, he might be gone before then. Then at number 124, I ended up taking Tyjae Spears, the running back from Tulane. Maybe a controversial pick to some, knowing the running back position right now with J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill. But there is a bit of uncertainty in the future years with that position. Will the Ravens pay J.K. Dobbins? This is a contract year for J.K. Dobbins. Gus Edwards, what's his role beyond this season? And obviously Justice Hill, while he was re-signed to a 2-year deal, what's the offensive role for Justice Hill moving forward? I think Tyjae Spears is someone he's one of the best running back prospects in this class. Now, did suffer a torn ACL in 2020, and he's someone who I think bounced onto the scene and did a really good job. He has speed. He's super quick. He's really agile as well. And I think for him, you look at the vision, he's very secure with the ball. You're not going to get a lot of fumbles out of him. Really good play balance too, something I really like with J.K. Dobbins in his game. I think Tyjae Spears emanates that a little bit. He's a very hard runner. Like his instincts are also there a lot. Now, his build might be a cause for concern with some people. 5'10", 190, not a bruiser type of guy. Like, he's not going to take on 5 defenders. But again, that competitive running style does give him an edge. He's a super big play guy as well. And also, I think people would like a little more in the passing down department. But to me, I think this would be a solid mid-round running back addition that I think could pay dividends for Baltimore. Maybe if you want to use him as a third running back and maybe promote him in a role in a couple of seasons, depending on what that position looks like, I think Tyjae Spears could be that guy for them. So I was content with this pick, especially because I went need with the last 2 Ravens picks I had here. Parker Washington, wide receiver from Penn State, was my pick at 157. I like Parker Washington a lot. 5'10", 207. I know there are the concerns about, kind of the untraditional wide receiver build with him with that 5'10", 207, but the ball skills are there. I mean, the hands are there. Super, super strong hands catcher and contested catch ability, which have just been, you watch the highlight tape. He's incredible. He also could be a special teams guy. We know John Harbaugh loves his special teams guys, so maybe he can carve out a roster spot there. Also in space, super, super dangerous, which I really, really like. Now, as a route runner, does need a little bit of improvement there. I wouldn't throw him in and play him 95% of snaps. But at the same time, I think a player like him is a guy to take a flyer on, especially with guys like James Prochet and Tylan Wallace not necessarily panning out right now. I think Parker Washington might be a higher upside player at this point, but I know the ceiling concerns will be there with some people. Then finally, at number 199, I picked Alex Austin, the corner from Oregon State. Again, so I do 2 wideouts, 2 corners, and a running back, but I think it's a solid needs-based draft. But for Alex Austin, he's one of my late-round guys, so I really, really like. And for him, he's someone who has a prototypical NFL build. He is 6'1", 191. And for him, he's someone who's a plus athlete. I mean, he's very athletic as well. And he is so competitive. He is extremely competitive. He moves very fluidly as well. And he's not necessarily the most physical player. Like in terms of him and what he excels at, it's more footwork and being patient and using his football IQ. And as a zone guy, he actually reacts very, very well and is a good closer. He closes the gap very well too. But for me, I think this is a flyer. Like you can take a flyer on him, and I think he can grow into a role at the NFL level. So overall, this draft, I liked it a lot. I like the players I got. And I know some people are higher on these guys like Quentin Johnston than others. I personally am kind of in the middle on a lot of these guys, but I think this would, if it were to happen, be a pretty solid draft for the Ravens. So coming up in our second segment, we'll be diving in to the Darius Slay situation, talking about what in the world happened and just how close Darius Slay was to becoming a Raven and what could have been in Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. And you've heard me talk about this mobile game app, and if you've ever thought you make a good GM, you got to give this game a try. It's not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory through trying to build a historic dynasty. And there are a ton of decisions you have to make, good decisions, bad decisions, and each one of those decisions will have major consequences, both good or bad, to your franchise. And once you download it, you don't even need Wi-Fi to play. You can play it in app play as well. And you can play it with friends and family as well. It's a really fun experience for either yourself solo or with multiple people. And with Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing all the finances, including negotiating player salaries and terms. You navigate your franchise through free agency, the draft, injuries, player and personnel issues, and all the ups and downs of a season. And all this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Ravens, this is going to 100% free boost to their franchise using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, and make sure to check it out today. Download the game, says at ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. We are back, our second segment here on Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, still talking Ravens football with you here on Monday, a mock draft Monday. But let's move away from the draft a little bit and talk about Darius Slay. Now, over the weekend, a clip surfaced from Darius Slay's podcast where, he instant reacts to games and whatnot and situations. And he talked about his return to Philadelphia and just what that situation was like and how it ended up coming to fruition. And he talked about how the Ravens were a key player in those sweepstakes. And obviously for those who either forget or don't remember or just aren't aware of the situation and what happened, after the reports that Darius Slay was getting released by the Eagles started to drop, Marlon Humphrey tweeted out that, this could be a big day and some eye emojis, and Darius Slay retweeted it. And everybody's thinking, well, what does that mean? And everybody's thinking, oh, maybe Darius Slay is going to go to Baltimore. And what a secondary. And everybody started talking about, could this be a big signing? Could this be the guy opposite Marlon Humphrey? Two insane cornerbacks, that incredible corner duo. And then a couple hours later, he goes back to the Eagles. And so my joke was, the Darius Slay era was that day in the afternoon to that day at night. And that's what it was. But Darius Slay kind of shed light on the situation and ended up saying that he says this close to being a Baltimore Raven, and makes a little gesture with his fingers. Says, super, super, super close to being a Raven, and kind of talked about that situation being, the Ravens came in, they were the first team to come in and offer him the deal that he wanted. And he said, that was what he wanted. That's what he was looking for. But ultimately said, if the Eagles did that for him, he wanted to go back to Philadelphia. And ultimately the Eagles did do that, apparently, and that's where he went back. Now, looking at the contract that Darius Slay signed, because I do want to look at that because that's apparently what the Ravens are willing to do. It's a 3-year, $42 million contract, I believe the same as Marcus Peters. So $14 million per season, $14 million average salary. The cap hit this year for Darius Slay in 2023 is $11.8 million. Next year, 2024, $10.9, right around $11 million there. And then the cap hit in 2025 is $14.4 million. Now, there is an out after the 2024 season, after 2 years of this deal. But, it's not necessarily super pretty because you have all the dead cap money, but there are the void years added on to that. So there are void years up to 2029. It seems like the Ravens do have more of a willingness, I guess, to put on some void years at the end of contracts. It's something we've seen. I think Taysom Hill was the one that kind of made shockwaves with that. But the question becomes, and this is something, again, I want to expand on this throughout the rest of the week, and honestly might be the main topic for tomorrow's show, is are the Ravens just unwilling to spend on offense? Because we look at what they've done corner-wise, spending secondary-wise, spending on the defensive side of the ball, and we see those big-time contracts. We see the Marlon Humphrey deal. We see the Roquan Smith deal, the Marcus Williams deal. If this Darius Slay deal went through, would have been there too. But on the offensive side of the ball, obviously the Ravens have Ronnie Stanley on the big contract, right? It's a fact. They have Mark Andrews. They signed him to a big extension on the contract. They have that as well. But the other spending, I mean, Lamar Jackson, if he gets signed to a long-term extension, they're going to have a lot of that money shift over to offense. But I think this is more in question of the wide receiver position, where it's just the Ravens have spent so much on defense over the years. People just want to see that even out a little bit on the wide receiver aspect of things, on the offensive side of the ball, where for this team, it's been defense, and there has been not a lot of attention, or at least not nearly as much attention put onto the offensive side of the ball. And that, I think, frustrates a lot of people because of just we know the defense is good, right? This Ravens defense right now, as it is, we know they're good. They had a great year last year. They stepped up to the plate, and that's because they invested money in that secondary and in that defense. But now, with the Ravens, really having a big hole at wide receiver right now, and Nelson Aguilar not being the guy, like he cannot be the guy that you sign and be like, all right, we're good. Let's go. Let's start the season. You can't have Nelson Aguilar be the move. You just can't do it. It would be a massive misstep by the organization. I think they understand that, and they know that based off of the rumors that we've been hearing about, the Ravens going after guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Cortland Sutton and whatnot, which I think would be big moves. But would they have been able to go after a guy like, a DeAndre Hopkins or a Cortland Sutton with Darius Slay under contract? I think it would have hindered their ability to. I'm not saying they couldn't, but, with the cap they have right now, they still need to clear out space. I believe they're, $6 million right now with the Aguilar deal under the cap. So you have to figure out just where you want to spend and how much you want to spend where. I do think the Ravens need another cornerback. I do. That's a big need for them. And, a player like a Marcus Peters on a team-friendly deal, I mean, there's no denying. Like, I would have loved Darius Slay in Baltimore. I don't want to put the message out there that I wouldn't have loved it. I would have, 100%. I think it would have been a great ad. But I think what frustrates people is just where's the spending for the offensive side of the ball? Where's the spending for Lamar? That's kind of the sense I'm getting from a lot of people there, and I understand it. But I think when you're looking at what it could have been, I mean, Marlon Humphrey, Darius Slay, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, what a secondary. I mean, seriously, what a secondary that would have been. You have two number one corners with Humphrey and Slay, a really solid safety in Marcus Williams, one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best free safeties in this league, and then a young up-and-coming player in Kyle Hamilton who you can play all over the field. Plus, you have guys like Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen and Justin Madubuike. It would have been nice to have Calais Campbell back, but that ship has obviously sailed. And, I think young potential guys like Odafe Owe and David Ojabo, can those guys put it together? But now you're kind of back to the drawing board with, is it going to be Marcus Peters? Is it going to be Rocky Ya-Sin? Are they going to take a first-round corner and just call it a day there and trust guys like Brandon Stevens and Jalen Armour-Davis and Pepe Williams? Who knows? Who knows what it'll be? But it's an interesting point, an interesting conversation point, which is where the spending has been. Because if the Ravens gave Darius Slay $14 million a season, there would have been a lot of conversation. I think people would have liked the move, but there would have been a lot of conversation about where's the spending on the offensive side of the ball outside of Ronnie Stanley and outside of Mark Andrews. Because you look at the deals, Morgan Moses, 3 years, 15. They let Ben Powers walk. Kevin Zeitler, they signed him to a 3-year, $27 million deal. So there was some spending there, but comparing the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball, there is a clear gap in the spending there. So Darius Slay almost this close to being a Raven, but it apparently was not meant to be. The Eagles came in there at the last hour, made that offer, and the rest is history. So we'll see what the Ravens do corner-wise. We'll see what they do wide receiver-wise. But an interesting wrinkle, and I think the other frustrating part, the other frustrating part is the almost part of this. We've heard the almost. He was almost a Raven. He almost went to Baltimore. We've heard it so many times. The Ravens almost put off a deal, right? We've heard, I think DeAndre Hopkins is the one that people look at. There are others, don't get me wrong, but people are tired of that the Ravens were the runner-up. The Ravens were the second choice. People just want to have a deal closed, right? Get one of these star guys, close that deal, and not be the almost team, not be the second place team. They want to be that first place team. So that's another aspect to it too. But coming up in our final segment, we'll look at some mock drafts from Twitter here to round out our show. So be sure to stay tuned. So let's dive into on Locked On Ravens. We're back here, our final segment, Locked On Ravens Monday edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you again. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today here, making us your first listen here each and every day. And be sure to subscribe, both audio and video form, for free, no money involved. You don't have to pay any money here. We are free for you 5 days a week. So all the Ravens content you want here, we have it for you. And you want to tell a friend, tell a family member, if they want Ravens content, if they're a Ravens fan, pass along our show. I really would appreciate that. But let's now talk about some mock drafts we got here from Twitter. And again, I put the mock draft out on Twitter. If you want to put your mock draft in that to be talked about on our show, let's put it below that Locked On Ravens tweet, and I'll be sure to try to get to it throughout the whole week here on Locked On Ravens. But let's first start off with two here from the Caleb Williams Tank Bus, and who says, I got two for you, probably late for Monday, but two of my faves. No, they are right here. They are right here on Monday's show. So we'll first start off 25, Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver from TCU. The Ravens obviously make a trade here. I can't see the actual trades on the PFN mock draft simulator because PFF made theirs pay. You have to pay for it. So people have moved over to PFN, or I use mock draft database. Then at 57, Felix Anukide Uzoma, the edge from Kansas State, and that's 57. Darius Rush, corner from South Carolina at 93. Mike Morris, edge from Michigan at 144. Jacorian Bennett, corner Maryland at 157. And Nick Saldivari, the Old Dominion guard at 199. Then the second one, Deontay Banks, Maryland corner at 22. A.T. Perry, wide receiver, Wake Forest at 86. Zach Harrison, edge from Ohio State at 124. Rajon Wright, corner from Oregon State at 157. Yaya Diaby, the edge from Louisville at 158. Matt Landers, the wide receiver from Arkansas at 216. Yazir Abdullah, the edge from Louisville at 235. So starting off with the first one, Quentin Johnston, I like that pick, especially at 25 in a trade. I don't think he – honestly, there are doubts. I don't think he's going to be there at 22 personally. Like, I think he may fall a little because of the 40 time, as we maybe saw with Kyle Hamilton last year, but I don't think he'll fall to 25. But hey, you take what the mock draft simulator gives you. I like that. Then an edge of 57 followed by a corner at 93. I would maybe flip that. I don't know who was on the board. Like if Julius Brents was there potentially, I don't know, but I do like Darius Rush a lot as a prospect in that like 75 to 100 area. So that's a solid pick. Then doubling down with Jacorian Bennett. They're only one wide receiver. It depends what they do for the rest of the offseason, but I might take two wideouts instead of two edge guys. But I think the Johnston pick is very solid there. Then getting Deontay Banks and Yazir Abdullah. The first and the last picks are my favorites in this one here. I think Deontay Banks is going to be really, really, really good. And I think I could really see the Ravens going after a player like that, especially if a guy like Joey Porter Jr. is off the board. Then Yazir Abdullah is one of my favorite mid to late round guys. I think he's going to be a stud. I really like his production. I like what he brings to the table, intangibles. So that's really good. Again, this one's three edges. I wouldn't take three edges in this situation. I would maybe add a running back or defensive lineman or something along those lines, maybe even a late round corner or quarterback, who knows. But to me, three edges is a little too much. I probably only take one edge personally. Zach Harrison's solid, so maybe it's either Harrison or Diaby or Yazir Abdullah for me. But I'd say solid. I think solid overall mock drafts here from the Caleb Williams Tank Bus. Let's now look at one from KT, who says Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia at 28 in a trade. DJ Turner, Michigan corner at 60 in a trade. Kayshon Boutte, the wide receiver from LSU at 86. Jalen Jones, corner from Texas A&M at 124. Tank Bigsby, running back from Auburn at 131. Byron Young from Alabama, defensive lineman at 157. Andrew Voorhees, interior offensive lineman from USC at 163. Daniel Scott, the safety from California at 199. He also put a second one here. Jordan Addison, wide receiver from USC at 31. Adetomiwa Adeboare, the edge from Northwestern at 57. Kalijah Kancey, Pittsburgh DT at 63. How the heck did he get there? Keitrell Clark, corner from Louisville at 157. And Jalen Green, Mississippi State safety at 199. How in the world did Kalijah Kancey get to 63? Kalijah Kancey's probably going he's going in the top 15, top 20. I would be thrilled with this one. You get Jordan Addison in the trade down at 31 and Kalijah Kancey at 63. Sign me up for this one. This is an A+ 100%. So shout out to KT for getting that one. Nolan Smith is solid. DJ Turner, Kayshon, but that's a solid 3. I don't think like the initial reaction to that, I don't think would be very good. Like I don't think people would be happy with it. Nolan Smith, the thing with Nolan Smith, and I've said this, is 3 high investments in the edge position might turn people off. Like you get Odafe Owe in the first round in 2021, David Ojabo in the second round, in 2022, and then Nolan Smith in the first round in 2023, with clear needs at wide receiver and corner. I don't know who was on the board here in this trade down situation. I still think that KT recovers here with DJ Turner and Kayshon Boutte and even Jalen Jones in the fourth at 124. But I just think that the Smith pick, I don't think would be well received. Not that it wouldn't be a good one, but I just feel like that's what it would be. And then a guy like an Andrew Voorhees, obviously serious injury at the combine, but he'd be like a stash guy. I think he's a really solid prospect, honestly, there. Next, we'll do one here from E-Money, who has the Ravens taking Deonte Banks, corner from Maryland, at 24. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, the edge from Kansas State, at 56. Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver from Ole Miss, at 124. Braden Daniels, offensive guard from Utah, at 157. And Dante Stills, the defensive tackle from West Virginia, at 199. So what you have here is a trade down, moving down 2 spots for Deonte Banks. I think very solid, and picking up the edge guy there at number 56. Jonathan Mingo in the 4th round. I think Jonathan Mingo goes 2nd, 3rd. I think if he fell to the 4th, that would be really, really good for the Ravens. I mean, it's amazing value, honestly. And then getting some big guys in the trenches, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, with those final 2 picks. So 1 corner, 1 wide receiver. You get the edge guy. I think edge is a need for the Ravens that is it's a sneaky one. It's a sneaky need for them. They have Bowser, they have Ojabo, they have Owe, but other than that, you kind of have to find some guys. I think they will probably take a pass rusher if they don't sign. I think they should sign a guy, sign a veteran, and then draft somebody. And I think, if they invest in a edge rusher in the first 4 rounds, I would not be shocked whatsoever. So solid mock draft here from E-Money. And then finally, let's get into one from Barrett King 89, who says traded 22 for 38, 70, 109, and 174 with Arizona. Keep in mind to view Brian Branch as a corner here, as he played there a ton for Alabama and was just as good. So Brian Branch, 38, is the pick safety from Alabama / corner, as Barrett King 89 does say there. Tank Dell, wide receiver from Houston, at 70. Jalen Jones, corner from Texas A&M, at 86. Andre Carter, the second edge from Army, at 109. A.T. Perry, wide receiver from Wake Forest, at 124. Andrew Voorhees, interior offensive lineman from USC, at 157. Daniel Scott, safety from California, at 174. And Jalen Redmond, defensive line from Oklahoma, at 199. I like Brian Branch a lot. Don't think he'll be there at 38, but you take what the simulator gives you. His fit for me is Philadelphia. Honestly, I would not be shocked if he went to Philadelphia in the earlier part of the first round. He's a super solid player. Ravens fans would be in shambles if they picked Brian Branch, because they see the safety. They see, why would you take 2 safeties, Kyle Hamilton and Brian Branch, in the first round in back-to-back years? I agree he is much more than a safety. He can play all over the field. I talked about that on last week's show, where I actually took him, and the mock draft was not well received, so that's how I know it would not be a very well-received pick. Tank Dell, obviously on the smaller side, I still think a very good wide receiver. Then doubling down at corners or defensive back with Jalen Jones at 86. I like Andre Carter at 109 is great value. A.T. Perry, super intriguing guy. Voorhees is someone I mentioned, that stash guy. Jalen Redmond, I think, has off the field issues. I don't know if that would impact the Ravens in their selection of him, but I think he's a solid player. Don't want to take away from what he is on the field, but I just don't know if the off the field stuff with him would be absolutely, take him off the draft board deal. But I like this one. I like this mock draft a lot, especially in a trade down situation. Eric DeCosta gets his picks, and the Ravens still get a really solid player, a top prospect in Brian Branch, and can still maneuver around that draft board and get needs with the rest of those selections. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. When we get back here tomorrow, more Ravens talk from us. So be sure to subscribe, follow along with us, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.